Hello everyone, my name is Robert Turco and I am the Unorthodox Historian. In today's video, we will be covering one of the many weird but interesting vehicles that was made during the 1960s in the Cold War. We will then talk about what its purpose was and ultimately what happened to it. Now, to start us off, I'm going to ask a question to you, dear viewer. When I ask you to think about something in the 1960s, what would you usually think of? You might have thought of things such as the moon landing, maybe the Beatles and Beatlemania, maybe the first Super Bowl ever, or maybe the ugliness of tie-dye shirts. However, there is one major event that stands above all the rest, and that, of course, is the Cold War. Now, during the Cold War, there were plenty of designs and plenty of secret projects on both sides that were made. Some of them looked like their owners just did a whole line of drugs before coming out and presenting it to their superiors. Other designs could have ended up changing the course of the Cold War from a military standpoint. And there is one major design that could have ended up turning the tides within the Soviets' favor, and that is what the West called the Caspian Sea Monster. Now, in the 1960s, the Soviets wanted to experiment with something new, something fresh, and what they decided to experiment with was something called the GEV, or Ground Effect Vehicle. Ground effect vehicles are able to use fixed surfaces as a runway. This effect means that the aircraft can have a reduced drag when it's trying to take off, and this effect usually kicks in when the aircraft ends up flying at a very low altitude, and this would make it perfect because it could then take off from seawater. Now, when the Soviet government decided to experiment with this, they ended up tasking the Russian Central Hydrofoil Design Bureau to begin the experiment with a new design that they called the KM, or in their words, the model ship. But this thing ended up being much more than a ship. The Soviets ended up tasking this handsome man, Rustayev Alexeyev, to make them what they so desired. Alexeyev came up with the Ekranoplan concept. This new design had 10 engines in total, 8 jet engines in the front, with 4 of them on each side, and 2 in the back, allowing it to travel at a comfortable 402 miles per hour. However, this design was not outfitted with any weapons, as it wasn't designed for that yet. And the Soviets decided to test this within their own backyard, a location known as the Caspian Sea. Now, also during the Cold War, there was a lot of spying. Aerial reconnaissance planes flew overhead both sides, spies breaking into each other's secret labs, trying to figure stuff out. But on one particular day, the Americans were doing a routine spy plane flyover in a U-2 spy plane, and it managed to capture an image of Alexeyev's Ekranoplan sitting in the Caspian Sea itself. Now, these pictures in the 1960s weren't as good. They were all grainy, they were black and white, nothing compared to the 4K cameras that we have today. And when this picture ended up making its way back to Washington, this ended up causing somewhat of a panic. And the Americans had initially no idea what its purpose was or what this even looked like. They ended up giving this strange object the nickname of the Caspian Sea Monster. Now, the KM continued to fulfill its testing role until the 1980s. It ended up crashing into the Caspian Sea itself, unfortunately. No one was hurt, but the Soviets decided to abandon the first prototype, leaving it to fully embrace the waters and embrace its new home at the bottom of the sea. But this wasn't the end of the Ekranoplan. The Soviets ended up building another one. This right here is the Loon-class Ekranoplan. Now, this Ekranoplan worked as an attack and transport vessel. Unfortunately, it traveled at a much slower speed than the Mk version, only going at 341 miles per hour. And the slow speeds ended up being due to the 6 anti-ship missile launchers that were placed on top of it. Now, what this was intended to do was it could fly across the Baltic Sea maybe and supply Soviet troops landing within the Scandinavian countries. Maybe it had to fly across several bodies of water in order to transport Soviet troops to another region where they could be more useful, or even deliver great supplies to cities throughout Russia that were on the sea. But its main purpose was to be used as an anti-ship missile launch platform. It was made so that it could fly so low that it would then be undetectable by radar, as radar at that point in time couldn't pick up objects that were below a certain height. It would then be able to launch its missiles and then quickly run away. Unfortunately, or fortunately, however you stand on the Cold War, only one model of this class was ever built, and it sits today at the edge of the Caspian Sea. There it is, sitting there, rotting away, left to die by the Soviet government it was so designed by. The Soviets ordered this to be beached, as the Soviet Union had collapsed itself. Now, in modern-day Russia, the Akronoplan sits there. No designs for it, no help for it, nothing. It just sits there, rotting away, acting as its own little tourist destination. Thank you so much for watching today's video. Please, if you enjoyed today's video, why not hit like and subscribe? And if you hit subscribe, why not hit the bell icon too, so you can keep up with whenever I end up posting next. Thank you so much for watching, and in case I don't see you, good afternoon, good evening, and good night.